Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of our podcast. Again, we are delighted to have Jonathan in his presence today. For everybody listening in, Jonathan, do you mind kind of giving a brief introduction, giving your name, the sport that you play, as well as the university that you attended?
Absolutely, yeah. First and foremost, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate the opportunity and all that you're doing. My name is Jonathan Curran. I was a graduate student at St. Mary's College of California. I played golf for all 5 years there. Absolutely loved every second of my time up there. I just graduated with my MBA this past month, so was blessed enough to be able to do both my undergrad and grad studies there at St. Mary's. Was business undergrad, business graduate school. And as I mentioned, played golf there, was super involved in student athlete leadership and loved my experience as a student athlete.
And I know how hard it is to balance, golf and school, especially business, since there's a lot of components to that. So when you're looking back to your time at St. Mary's, how did your journey as a student athlete shape you both personally and athletically?
Yeah, I think balance is so difficult. It's something that I honestly struggled with in my time because my journey with golf, I came to the sport a lot later than most golfers do. I didn't really start playing until my freshman year of high school, which is really late for a golfer. I played baseball, was more kind of raised as an athlete where I played all different sports growing up. So I was never really accustomed to golf. So when I came to the sport, I came to the sport late, which means I had a lot of catching up to do. So I really kind of prided myself on my work ethic, right? After school, I would go straight to the golf course. I'd be there till sundown pretty much every single day. And with that, there wasn't a lot of balance in my life, right? It was pretty much school, sport, sleep, essentially. And whenever there was social time, there was, I guess, but it wasn't really a huge priority for me because I was trying to catch up essentially on 10 years of my junior career that I missed out playing different sports. So when I eventually got to the Division I level and to the collegiate level at St. Mary's, some of those habits were still just ingrained into me, right? I mean, you don't just stop becoming a hard worker when you get to school. If anything, it gets amplified even more. So I was really finding a little bit of a hard time without even knowing it in balancing sports, school, and social. I was blessed enough to have done well in both school and sport. I know that it's something that's always been a priority for me, so I would always make the time. But where my lack of balance came in was sleep and social, where I didn't get too much sleep, right? There were a lot of times where we come back from the golf course 8:30 or whatever. Hopefully the dining hall was still open so that we could get food. But then you'd go to the library, right? You'd go to an empty classroom and you'd be in there. I remember sometimes my freshman year till like 1, 2 in the morning, just doing work. And then you got class at 8 a.m. the next day, right? Or in that case, the same day. So there's really not too much balance when it comes to college athletics when you get to a certain level. But as my collegiate career grew and as I became more and more experienced and more mature, I started to realize the importance of balance and that I became like it was really important for me to have other aspects of my life that I enjoyed, not just golf or not just school. Because when you spend so much time in one thing, right, that's when kind of burnout can happen or anything else along those lines. So finding new ways to kind of finding new outlets where I was able to be my full self, find new relationships to entertain, find new hobbies to have. Those are things that became super important to me my senior and graduate year. And that's when I started to live a little bit more of a healthy life and have a healthier relationship with my sport.
I know you briefly mentioned kind of, balancing. It's a balancing act, right? The whole nature of it, everything that you're trying to do. But specifically when we look at academics and athletics, I mean, how are you able to maintain kind of that healthy balance between both, right? You have that priority as far as, for some schools, it's, hey, if you're an athlete, you got to maintain a certain GPA, but you also have to make sure that athletically you're playing well, you're training enough, you're doing good in practice, you're doing good out on the course. stuff like that. So how are you able to really maintain that balance there? Were there any resources on campus that you used? Was it kind of just that work ethic that you instilled in yourself from a young age? And it was just something where, hey, it's just kind of easy. I just had to prioritize some more studies along those lines. But ultimately, Jonathan, what worked best for you?
I think it really boils down to your habits, where it's not even necessarily the amount of time that you have, it's how well you use that time, right? And a huge thing for me, something that really changed the game in my habits was prioritizing being present, right? Our phones are always with us everywhere. Our phones, they're great. They allow us to be social. They allow us to talk to other people, but most of the time they're a distraction, right? And if you have 2 hours in the library where you got work to do and you have your phone with you, you could so easily waste like an hour and a half just procrastinating stuff just simply because your phone's there and you can have that habit with your phone. So one of the things that kind of changed the game for me is I would start leaving my phone in my car and just be like, okay, I'm going to have these 2 hours. I'm going to work really hard in these 2 hours. And then if it's 30 minutes of being social, then afterwards, like fine, all out. I'd much rather have that 2 hour block for me where I could be fully productive and get all the stuff that I needed to do done. And then have the other aspects of my life that I could then entertain instead of trying to do them both at the same time. So that was a really good habit that I try to even carry with me now. Like even on this podcast, my phone is in the other room. Like it's just I'm fully here right now with you guys. Like that's something that I try to really prioritize and value in my life. And as you start to do that more and more, you start to realize some of the other things that you can prioritize and value in different aspects as well. And that leads to another point that helps with balance is a support system and help, right? As student athletes, most of the time we have a really great support system and kind of built in academic support in our athletic department, right? So reach out to your faculty advisor, reach out to your athletic advisor. They're here to help you. That's one thing that, I mean, I ended up going in there pretty much every single day and just talking to them. Most of the time, it wasn't even about school, but just having those conversations, building those relationships, building that network. That was something that ended up being super crucial to me because then they would ask about school, right? How's it going? And then the more accountability partners that you can establish, the more likely you are to succeed in prioritizing academics and athletics.
And kudos to you for being able to put your phone away because at St. Mary's, whenever somebody looks at me, I feel like I'm always on my phone and I'm very much so like distracted where I don't see certain people and I don't get my work done. And I know that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety.
Totally.
But I know recently I've been kind of good about it, especially at work, where I'm like, okay, my phone is gonna be somewhere far away because I'm not gonna want to walk to it because that's the last thing I'm gonna want to do. But I know that when you are full of stress, having a good support system is also very crucial and also very helpful in the terms of, helping with your mental health and being able to feel like you have somebody that you can talk to and trust because there's not a lot of people like that in the world that you can go to and talk about with these things. And I know especially in like athletics, it's something that not a lot of people want to talk about. So, how important do you feel that mental health is for these student athletes? And how did it shape you personally in your own athletic career?
Yeah, I think mental health is the most important thing for a student athlete. And it's something that I had to, mental health kind of humbled me in that sense. And it's a long story, but one that I'm happy to share now and something that I'm grateful for every opportunity to share. So I was the student athlete that was never going to be affected by mental health, right? I would sit there at the beginning of every single year, right? We'd have our beginning of year meetings. They'd go over a few slides about mental health. They'd give us the resources. We'd all be there listening, but in the back of my head, right, it's, I'm not going to need that, right? Subconsciously, you're kind of turned off to it a little bit because you're just like, okay, it doesn't, that doesn't apply to me, right? I'm going to be the one. It's going to work out for me. It's going to be no big deal, right? It's not going to apply to me. Wow, it's good to believe in yourself, right? It's also so important to set yourself up for success in all aspects of your life. So I had never really even talked about mental health until my story ended up kind of bringing me to my knees a little bit with it. So, as we talked about, I was engulfed in my sport, right? I was engulfed in student athlete leadership. I was engulfed in school. I was super busy and super blessed to have all of those responsibilities and opportunities. But it got to a point where what I did became who I was. And a huge part of that is athletic performance, right? And something that every student athlete struggles with because it is such a competitive environment where most of the time you are as good as your last performance. And that's extremely tough pill to swallow, especially when you're competing, not only just to win games and do everything like that, but to play as well, right? Every student athlete wants to win championships. They want to win games. They want to win their conference, but most importantly, they want to play, right? And they want to be a contributing factor on their team. And in order to do that, you're competing against your own teammates as well. So every single day you show up and there's some type of competitive expectation on you, whether it's from an outside source or from internally, that you have this desire and you have this expectation of yourself. And it became exhausting, right? It is extremely tough to consistently live up to that every single day. And there are times where I did that really, really well, right? My fourth year up at St. Mary's in the fall, I played excellent golf, right? I was killing it. It's one of the best times in my career golf wise where I was going out there, I was shooting a lot under par. I was enjoying it, right? I was really, really excited about the success I had on the golf course. But then when you looked at my life, outside of it, it was completely out of balance, right? And that's how we talked about where balance started to become a priority for me because I saw the effects of it not being one. But it came to a point where my spring semester, then I started to go through some adversity, wasn't playing the golf that I wanted to. Because of that, then, right, with so much of my identity wrapped in my athletic performance, when my athletic performance was quote unquote failing, for lack of a better word, my identity became that of a failure as well. And that's an extremely toxic thought and like a very something that's very a hard pill to swallow, if you know what I mean. And it started to really weigh on me mentally where I wasn't myself, right? I'm typically very even keeled, very positive person, very optimistic, would never let my words get away from me or my actions get away from me, that type of thing. On the golf course, I was not in a very good headspace then that semester, right? I was out there, didn't have control of my emotions, right? Said a lot of things that I wish I didn't say. But it eventually led to a point where like I kind of just broke down one day and just like lost it, like broke a gasket in my mind, completely had a mental breakdown. It led to me leaving school, leaving the golf team for like a week and a half. I ended up coming back home here in Arizona. My parents flew up to get me. We flew back literally the next day. But it's something that no one really knew, right? It's something where everyone who saw me saw a role model student athlete. I'm blessed to be able to say that, right? But it was, okay, this kid has it all together in that sense, and mental health would never apply to him. And I think that made it really even more difficult to address my mental health because it was no one else was expecting me to have those problems or those struggles. But once I prioritized myself, I really realized how important mental health is. And it's something that I became passionate about. So when I returned back to school, I had some difficult conversations for sure, like with my coach, with my academic advisors, we've already talked about. But they helped me get plugged in with the people who I needed to get plugged in with and the mental health resources that I needed. And I'm definitely a product of a strong support system and of strong mental health resources. And that's a huge part of my story and something that I really share now. And it's something that I share through social media, through speaking to my student athletes, or I was able to speak to my student athletes now in a different stage of life now. But the thing that we try to drive home is that we're all more than athletes. We never want to just limit ourselves to our sport, right? Because if that's all that you're here to do, you're not really giving justice to all the other great things of who you are, to all the great dimensions of your identity to all that you do, right? We never want to be just a sport. We want to be Jonathan Curran, the person, not Jonathan Curran, the golfer. And that's something that really shaped my journey. But now prioritizing mental health on a daily basis, right? Getting into those habits as we've already talked about. But yeah, that's really my mental health story, and grateful to be able to share it now on platforms like these.
I know you briefly kind of mentioned it as far as the support system that you received towards the tail end there, as far as that. But do you mind kind of diving a little bit deeper into the support system, whether that's at St. Mary's itself, whether it's, talking a little bit more about the coaches, the friends, the family that you had kind of around you to really uplift you and bring you through that moment?
Totally. I mean, my support system is one of the greatest flexes in my life for sure, right? Where that day where kind of crap hit the fan, if you know what I mean, my parents literally flew out that day, where I had my best friend up at school. He came and stayed with me the entire day, right? He just knew, like, it got to, like, my mental breakdown led to, like, literally physically I was not okay. Like, I was like, you could tell that there was a lot of stuff going on with me. So I'm so blessed to, like, be able to have those friends where to come and stay with me. It took me out to get food, even though I could barely eat, that kind of thing. Stayed with me till my parents got there. My parents then flying me home. Having a couple of people text me, like really close friends text me when I came home just to check up on me. That meant the world, right? And then when I got back to school, right, the game changer for me was therapy, and therapy became provided through the athletic department, which I was so grateful for, because that's never something I would have explored on my own, right? As a male student athlete, I was way too macho for that, right? And it takes a large pill of humility in order to get to that point. And that's one of the stigmas in mental health alone, especially men's mental health, is like therapy is this treatment for people who suffer from depression, and that's just so far from the truth, right? Therapy is really, it's a tool for people who want to be their best, and that has completely changed the way that I look at therapy, completely changed the way that I talk about therapy. That therapist and I kind of instantly hit it off. And not saying it was easy, not saying that I was open from the first meeting that we ever had. I've actually never met my therapist in real life. It's been completely virtual, which is amazing, right? Because I'm able to talk to him pretty much wherever. We meet on a weekly or biweekly basis, whatever it is, but I can speak to him wherever, whenever I need to. But it's such an important relationship for me now that I'm continuing on with him even after athletics. So I still talk to him twice a month. I'll talk to him a week from yesterday, actually, so next Monday. But those are the relationships that become so important for you, right? And the support system is that I have always been independent in that, like, I want to hold myself accountable. I know that I can do it correctly, that I can do it by myself, that kind of thing. But I realize that you can only kind of go so far when you're by yourself, right? And it's the people that are on your team, the people who are in your corner, those are the people that you start to live for, to be honest. Those are the people that you start to be the best version of yourself for, the people that you do all this great work for, right? The people that you compete for sometimes. My support system has always been a huge part of my reason why. So I think that, specifically to relate back to the athletic department, mental health resources are so important, right? Because a lot of the times student athletes don't even have time to explore it on their own. And that's a really tough point to make, right? When you think about, all right, if an 18-year-old kid doesn't have enough time to prioritize himself, what are we really doing here? But without the athletic department's success, without their investment in our own collective mental health, but my mental health especially, I'm not sure if I would be here saying, like, being able to share my story as I am now. So I can't speak enough to the importance of a strong support system, and can't say thanks enough to my athletic department at St. Mary's.
Yeah, like, I personally have never met the athletic department at St. Mary's, but I know a lot of people that have used them as a resource, especially when they have, like, off days with their therapist, or they have meetings with them, and then maybe the day after, they're like, "Okay, maybe I should follow up with
Mhm.
my, like, academic advisor or somebody," like, else that actually knows more about sports than just somebody that knows about business or communication or whatever the academic trail you want to take. But I know that you've touched on, graduating, being done with golf and college athletics, but I know you've also been able to go to the course a couple of times. So what has been your overall challenge with leaving college and being able to balance this time that you have now with being able to go to the course and practice your sport?
It's something that I've never experienced, to be honest with you. I mean, the toughest part about the transition out of college athletics is my entire life has been based around an athletic schedule, right? I played a lot of sports growing up. I focused on baseball for a bit, transitioned to golf, focused on golf for the last 9-ish years of my life, right? There's always been practice. There's always been a tournament to compete for. There's always been a tournament to prepare for. That is a huge part of my day-to-day schedule, right? My day-to-day calendar is to get better for this tournament, right? When you take away the reason for your day-to-day calendar, for your day-to-day schedule, it becomes really difficult, right? You're like, okay, it boils down to why get out of bed today, right? If there's nothing to compete for, if there's nothing to look forward for athletically. And I think that's just how we are wired as athletes, right? We're always looking forward to the next thing, looking forward to the next competition, the next tournament, the next travel trip, whatever it may be there. But there's always been something, right? And then remove yourself from college athletics, maybe not playing your sport at the same competitive level that you were at, it becomes hard to go to the course, right? In my instance, because I've never played golf just for fun. I've played golf to win, right? And to be a competitive athlete, to achieve success, whatever that may be. And I know that we'll get into that here in a little bit as well. But there's always been a purpose for it, right? And that purpose has never just been for enjoyment. So that's been something really difficult for me, right? And as I finished my collegiate career, the 2 months following that, I'd only really been to the golf course and played a full round 3 times, right? That's the biggest break that I've ever taken from golf. But I am loving this kind of new, healthier relationship with my sport that I have now, and that I'm just playing freely, right? I'm playing out there because it's something that I love to do. And I think that sometimes in college athletics, it's really easy to lose that love, right? Because you just get engulfed with, I've got practice at 6 a.m. and then I've got practice again at 2 p.m. and I've got class in between then. And I'm supposed to find some time to eat and maybe go to the training room. And then I haven't even talked about school yet, right? And when you do that, it's really hard to remember the love that you have for it because you just are trying to get through it. A specific challenge that I've faced in my transition is also maintaining the relationships that I built up at school, right? Because the common basis for those relationships was being in the athletic department, was being a student athlete. The people that I was blessed enough to meet and have relationships now are all because I was a student athlete at St. Mary's, right? And now I'm not anymore. So sure, I don't talk to them quite as much as I did, but understanding that my relationship isn't athletic based and it's more so because we enjoy each other as people and not as athletes, right? That has been game changing as well, and realizing like you don't have to completely cut yourself off from athletics. You don't completely have to say I'm a retired athlete anymore. I don't play my sport. I don't go to the gym, right? That's just not the case, right? You're still the athlete that you are. You're still the person that you are. And that's where realizing that you're more than an athlete really helps with defining those healthy boundaries and has helped my transition and overcoming some of those challenges.